Welcome to Raid. I'm JGigs, now the only content creator for Raid. Not sure if you heard, but all the other CCs just quit today. So it's just me now. Sorry. Plarium is inarguably one of the most successful mobile game developers of all time. It's not unreasonable to say their impact is measurable across the whole industry, as they're likely responsible to some degree of the more mainstream popularity of the gacha-style mobile RPG. They didn't create the genre, but they definitely took it to new heights and brought a lot of new players in who probably migrated to other games after some time spent playing Raid Shadow Legends, which is Plarium's biggest game and one of the biggest mobile games of all time. As they continue to garner unimaginable success with Raid Shadow Legends, Plarium has undoubtedly earned their spot among the titans in the mobile game industry. However, success alone doesn't mean good. And what even is success? Certainly to some degree that would be subjective. EA is successful in the sense that they make a lot of money, but if you ask most of the people who play their sports game in particular, I'd say the overwhelming majority is unhappy with the state of those games and EA's behavior as they pertain to those games. No one else is even allowed to make licensed NFL games. So sure, Madden is the biggest football game, but it's the only actual NFL game that exists, and people want to play NFL football games. Successful? Sure, in the sense that they make a lot of money and have the biggest football game in the world, but what about the way their customers view them? What about their standing in the industry? What about trust? I think most people that play Raid will tell you that Plarium is a bad developer, but do they actually have good reasons for saying that? As I've mentioned before, mobile gamers are a particularly fickle bunch. There are a lot of things to consider when deciding if a game developer is good or bad. It's not as simple as have they made a good game or do they make a lot of money. It's also not solely based on the way the player base feels about them, as it's often necessary for the health of your game to make unpopular decisions. Sometimes you have to do things that in the short term are going to result in a lot of negative feedback and maybe even losing players so that the long-term health of your game remains stable. So today, we're going to do our best to put our personal feelings aside and analyze Plarium as a game developer and try to answer the question once and for all, is Plarium actually a bad developer? Yes. Now, it's worth mentioning that Plarium has made some other games, and I have dabbled in them a little bit, but none of them are nearly as successful as Raid Shadow Legends, so for the sake of the context of this video, I'll be talking about Plarium exclusively as the developer of Raid. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, $16,000 Shave Club. It's basically identical in every way to Dollar Shave Club, but for people who want to be ridiculous because they're rich. Nah, I'm just kidding, that'd be pretty stupid, wouldn't it? We do need to take a minute to hear a word from today's actual sponsor, though, Surfshark. Ever since I moved to Australia, which is a real place, Madcapper, let it go, people won't stop talking to me about Breaking Bad, and I've never seen Breaking Bad, so I finally decided I'd watch Breaking Bad, but guess what? It's not on Netflix here, and I don't want to fly all the way back to America every time I want to watch a couple of episodes, so thankfully, after calmly sitting and reflecting for a while, I remembered I have Surfshark VPN, and all I have to do is use their Google Chrome extension and change my country back to the USA, and now I can watch it. Thank goodness I didn't overreact. Surfshark is an app and browser extension that not only allows you to change the location of your device, but adds an extra layer of security by encrypting all your data being sent between your device and the internet. It's honestly scary these days how easy it is for hackers to access your personal information, and a VPN adds so many extra layers of security when using the internet. Surfshark has over 3,200 servers in over 100 countries, so you can turn your device into a cultured world traveler. It's also much more than a VPN. It's an antivirus software that shields your devices from viruses, malware, and the tracking of ad companies and bots. It's a search engine that allows you to browse ad-free. It's a data removal service that helps you get your data off the market. And that's not even all. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If this sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure and use my link below to get 4 extra months free. And thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video. Let's start with technical execution. How good are they at making and releasing a polished, finished, bug-free game? I think it's reasonable to say they do this pretty well. There are a few examples of some bugs that literally make me want to dive through my window, but personal bias aside, I'd say Raid is almost bug/glitch-free, and for a game that's regularly getting sizable updates, I think they deserve some credit for that. One of the things that stood out to me about Raid when it first came out was that it was one of the first games I'd seen to intentionally deviate from the Summoner's War blueprint. They definitely still followed it, but they branched out in a few ways that no other developer seemed to be willing to, and it seems to have paid off. I don't know if I'd say anything they did was truly groundbreaking at the time, aside from the incredible graphics that the game had, but it was something a little different at the time of release. As with a lot of what we're talking about today, there are a few ways to look at it. On one hand, Hydra is a pretty unique game mode in the genre. The bosses in Doom Tower and some of the newer bosses in the game seem to be pretty innovative and unique and not ripped from other games. On the other hand, they don't really do a lot in the way of innovating their events or the formula for the relentless fusions that we get every month. They've continued to add new PvP modes over the years, but every single time they've done it, they've literally just copied and pasted the classic arena into different parts of the game. I sort of feel like they canceled themselves out in this category because in some ways they are pretty innovative, and in other ways it seems like they couldn't be less innovative if they tried. Player retention is something that you think would be pretty important to a game developer. Are you making games that people want to play for extended periods of time? In some ways, it seems like Plarium really struggles to understand player retention, but on the other hand, there are a lot of people in the community that have been playing for many, many years. There are many reasons that people play games for long periods of time, some of which have very little to do with the developer, at least directly. I did a poll for my community, and these are the results, so as you can see, there are a few reasons that people have been playing this game for a long time, and it's not necessarily due to anything Plarium has directly done. This is a tough category to grade them on because there are so many variables, but whether by accident or by design, Raid does seem to be a game that people are more than willing to play long term. Plarium does do them. They do happen. The only time anything really ever seems to be patched in a timely manner is when it's better for the player and worse for Plarium's wallet. If something is bad for the players or annoying for the players, it's going to take a while. Plarium has also shown some pretty aggressive bias to the bigger spenders in the game, letting broken teams stay broken for longer periods of time if those broken teams contain void legendaries or generally hard to obtain champions. If a rare is broken, it's going to get taken care of pretty quick. As for updates, we do see them fairly consistently. They have a pretty decent pace for releasing new content and minor changes here and there. We have seen a decent bit of quality of life over the years, but it tends to come out pretty half-assed and then get improved over the following year or so. Raid might have the most infrequent balance patches I've ever seen in any mobile game. I've never seen a developer so content to let a meta get stale and stay stale for such a long time, and when they do decide to change it, they tend to change it with the addition of new champions rather than changing the current ones. We have seen a small handful of very significant buffs over the years, but I think Plarium in general could stand to shake things up a bit more than they do. You have to be very careful as a game developer when it comes to listening to your player base. There's a reason you're the developer and they're the players. Your players are generally not going to be consciously interested in the long-term health of your game, but rather much more focused on the things that they want when they want them. If your game dies, they'll move on to the next game. You'll be stuck with a dead game. That being said, you definitely have to be open to some feedback and making some changes based on that feedback. It's a tough spot to be in and one you have to learn to navigate if you're going to be successful on a long-term basis. Plarium has an objectively awful relationship with their player base. While it may be a meme to a lot of us, there are people out there that genuinely believe that Plarium hates their players. They almost never take any feedback, and the times that it seems like they have taken feedback, it's speculated that it was planned to do whatever they were going to do anyway, but set up in a way to make it look like they took feedback. Remember when they were going to nerf Duchess? They were never going to nerf Duchess. Plarium has decades of experience in mobile games at their disposal through their content creator program, and I don't recall ever seeing them utilize that for the health of the game one time in the time that I spent in the program. Raid has, by far, the most aggressive and exploitative monetization model in the mobile RPG space. It's not uncommon to get 4 or more pop-ups in a row every single time you land on the home screen. Not only are they constantly in your face about spending money, but the items in Raid are particularly expensive, and prices seem to fluctuate on a whim. Players are shown packs catered to their spending habits. You'll sometimes be shown packs containing fragments for a fusion that you missed due to the very strict requirements set on the fusion so that you would miss them and be forced to buy them later. They did actually release a battle pass years ago that players were more than happy to spend money on and actually felt like they got good value for their money. So naturally, they did what any good developer would do and refused to release anything like it ever again. They did, however, drop the Forge Pass, which is for all intents and purposes the most boring version of a battle pass any video game has seen ever, and then continued to do it long enough that some people actually think it's good now. I could talk all day long about Plarium's monetization models, but to keep this video from being 7 hours long, we'll just say it's awful and move on. It's important as a developer that you maintain some sort of relationship with your players. You do this by regularly and honestly communicating not only your plans for the game, but the reasons for those plans. A lot of developers these days put event calendars in their games so that players can see what's coming up in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and plan accordingly. Plarium does not do this. One of the bigger complaints over the years from the players is that Plarium does not do an effective job of communicating. There is now a well-earned sense of distrust every time Plarium tries to engage with its players. As previously mentioned, Plarium has a pretty bad reputation. It's rare you'll hear anyone bring up Plarium in a positive light, and that's for the most part self-inflicted. They've spent years blatantly bullying their players into spending money and showing little to no regard for their time, so it's honestly not a surprise. As a game developer, you'll never make everybody in your player base happy, but it seems as though Plarium on a pretty regular basis specifically tries to not make everybody happy, and that's resulted in the relationship that you see now. So, is Plarium actually a bad developer? Yes. All jokes aside, I personally do think Plarium is a bad developer. If only it was as simple as, did you make a good game? I just don't think it's that simple anymore, especially in a living, ongoing game like Raid. Maybe back in the days when developers were finishing a game and releasing it, and those games would never see updates or anything other than a sequel, it was that simple. But we're in the era now of developers needing to create some sort of positive relationship with their players, and I don't think Plarium does that well at all. I do want to make sure that I clarify here that I'm talking about Plarium, the entity. The game developer, not any specific individuals or departments. Plarium has hundreds of employees, many of which probably do their jobs very well. I can personally say any of the interactions that I've had with anybody at Plarium has always been very pleasant and positive, but as far as the entity that is Plarium, I don't think they're a good overall developer. But who the hell am I? What do you think? Is Plarium actually a bad developer? I would be interested to hear your thoughts on this one. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you haven't seen it already, I did another video very similar to this one called Is Raid Actually a Bad Game? And you might be surprised at the verdict. Beyond that, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.